It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for attending. I know there's a lot of competition. My name is Joshua Bixby. I'm the president of Strangeloop. We are a company that accelerates websites. That's our business. I'm not here to talk about what we do specifically, but I am here to talk about the outcomes of acceleration, particularly to focus on the relationship between performance and key business metrics for normal companies. There's been so much research that's talked about Yahoo and Google and Amazon and eBay. And I want to share some results of companies that aren't like that might actually be more like you. We're really here to talk today about money. That's what drives all of this. Tim talked about in his speech about how performance and the key KPIs drive business, how, I liked his discussion about heroes and innovators. We're here to talk about money, but we're actually here to talk about something slightly different. We're here to talk about money and the fact that we have to make decisions about it. And really what I want everyone to take away from this, if they can, is how does performance change your priorities? What is your performance curve? Is performance the #1 priority that you have in your business? And most importantly, when you make other decisions, is performance a factor? I want to tell you a quick story. My son, I have a 4-year-old son, and I've got almost 4, August 1st, and I've got my other son is 7 weeks old. So I want to do a shout out to my wife for being a local hero, given that I've been here all week. I was telling my son, he's like, Dad, I don't want you to go down to San Francisco, or Francisco, I think is how he says it. And I said, I'm sorry, I have to go. And he said, why? And I said, because I'm going to go talk to people about performance. It matters. And he said, look at me. And so we ran from where we were just walking out of the house, straight down the stairs and right to the car. And he looked around and he said, Dad, I'm fast. It's better. So I was like, that's really cute. You get it. And I'm going to go talk to a whole bunch of people who get it and whose businesses might or might not get it. I want to start talking about the history of this really briefly. I want to spend a lot of time on the actual results. So one of the questions when we think of our performance curve, because what we want to talk about is how do we get good enough performance? Is there such a thing as good enough performance? Alistair Kroll and Hooman Beheshti did this, the first part of this as a webinar with Watching Websites group. I can't come close to doing as good a job as them, so I apologize in advance. Zona Research came out in 1999 with a bold statement about what good enough was. And they came and told us that it was 8 seconds. Some of you might remember the 8-second rule. Now, it wasn't just 8 seconds. It was 8 seconds times a whole bunch of factors that if you went to go try to sell to your business executives and or you are a business executive and you say, it's 8 seconds for us, but our users have a lot of tenacity. We have very tenacious users. We have users that have a very high natural patience. Well, this just isn't going to work. This research has obviously evolved. We now get into things that I like to call the sort of Barbie standard. Forrester came out, and we have a good relationship with Forrester, so certainly not to mock them, but Forrester came out with a report in conjunction with Akamai where the new standard's now 2 seconds. If your site doesn't render in 2 seconds, you're failing your users, you're losing money. All of these standards are good ways for us to simplify what's actually an incredibly complex problem. What we want to do today is share some of the results from increased performance. And again, what we know from performance, and we did a session yesterday that some of you would have attended because I see some familiar faces, where we talked about the fact that some of these performance enhancements, like turning on compression, doing keep alives, is simple. This should be a checkbox. Some of the things that get talked about in the context of performance are much, much more complicated and take much more effort. So again, it's this question of cost-benefit. And we go from easy to hard, and organizations have a very difficult time, we've found, because we're constantly talking to them, about where to invest, how much to invest, and where benefit's going to come from. There are 2 people. We have the honor of talking to a lot of organizations. There are 2 people that we talk to. On the right-hand side, we talk to the IT guy. I love these stereotypes. I had to bring them back as Alistair's at home awaiting his newest child, which should be coming in a few weeks, and he couldn't be here. But in honor of him, we've got the IT person on the right who, thinks of different things. We've got the business person or the marketer who's thinking about different things. Rarely do they meet. Rarely do they find something where the energy is going in the right direction. They both find themselves really thinking and acting on the same metric. I want to talk about how KPIs change this in a second. But first, I want to talk about what we know. Total, absolute, gratuitous flog of my blog, Web Performance Today, where we are trying to accumulate all of the resources, basically a cheat sheet on what's going on. I saw Tim do it. I rushed back up to the hotel room, added pictures of my blog, because I figure if he can do it, I can do it. I want to talk about the research that's been done to date. And I want to show you this. Again, I'm not the best person to interpret some of the analysis that's come out from Google and Bing from last year, but I want to set a level playing field. Some of you might know some of this, some of you might not, but I want you to see it. I want you to understand what has been qualified or quantified in the industry. First thing I want to do is I want to present it in the form of videos. Patrick, who I see is here, continues to get shout-outs. I understand he doesn't drink, so in one session it was get him beers. So don't get Patrick beers, buy him food or luxury items. If you want to thank him for all of his great work over at Web Page Test, what we've done is we've tried to simulate some of the tests that happen. The first one we're going to do is Google. And I want to show you what 400 milliseconds feels like. Let's take a look. So if you went to your executive team and you said, look at the amazing work I did, 400 milliseconds, we're going to make more money. You're probably going to get, that's not faster. Let's look at the results. If you're Google, and I'm sure some of you are in here, and you can make a 0.5 or 0.6 or a 0.7% difference impact on the average daily searches per user, this is a big deal. So one of the things that we find when we talk about this space is that actual numbers, real numbers, are really powerful. Let's take another example. Bing came out with, at the same time, actually, a joint session last year where they talked about, in conjunction with Google, some of the same numbers. Let's take a look at what 2 seconds feels like. OK. The grays, don't think about the grays. Just think about when you first started seeing the page. OK, I get it. That's 2 seconds. The impact's huge. What's interesting as we go through this is and in all of these slides, I find this fascinating. The stats that come out reflect the key KPIs that are important. What's interesting when we look at the Bing stats is we're not just looking, in this case, about user searches per day. 2 seconds, 200 milliseconds, creates a huge change in a number of key business metrics. From satisfaction to revenue per visit. Really, really interesting data. 2 seconds. You can also see the impact of 1 second, or 500 milliseconds, or 200 milliseconds. Only one analysis that was conducted in this particular survey, where it's A/B testing, showed no impact, and that was 50 milliseconds. Let's keep going. Shopzilla. Anyone here from Shopzilla? I'd like to congratulate all of the Shopzilla people, because I just think they put out some of the best data out there in this space. And as you'll see when we talk about our customers and the customers we encourage to put out data, that's a hard thing for companies to justify doing. Shopzilla, they got 5 seconds. Let's take a look at that. Yeah, that's pretty dramatic. That's incredibly impressive. If we look at what went into it, we're talking about a 16-month engineering project. And I love this graph. Any graph that shows like this is just a dream. Let's talk about what was important. What was important was a 5 to 12% increase in revenue. That's what was important. That's the money conversation. The cost conversation comes from what was 16 months of engineering, how many people, how much effort, was it worth it? We got to think of that too. But what would you do for a 5 to 12% increase in your revenue? Most companies would do a lot. Let's keep going. AOL released some data as well. I don't have a video for this because of the way the data was presented to us. All we know is percentiles and page views. But what's fascinating about this stat is what they're measuring. What's important to a lot of Google properties, unlike users, searches per day, we're talking here about page views. We don't know what the bottom axis is. We don't know if that's going from 0 seconds to 10,000 and what the percentiles are. What we do know is how important performance is. The difference between 8 seconds, 8 pages per visit, and 3 pages per visit is huge. It's the difference between those that are successful in the industry and those that aren't. Let's keep going. Firefox did this really cool study that came out after Velocity, or certainly wasn't presented here, where they tweaked their homepage, the page where you download Firefox, and they saw what happened. Let's take a look at those stats. And anything that looks like a slide that you'd look through a microscope just makes me very excited. It looks so technical. Average page loads from 5 seconds here down to 2.8. Decent sample size. Conversion. Better conversion, more downloads of Firefox, more Firefox. Let's keep going. I want to make sure you all have the same background as we do when we go into the real numbers here. About. Anyone see this today? This came out today or yesterday. This is right off the press. Very excited about the people that brought this to my attention. About.com undertook in conjunction with the Google team an acceleration project. They did a number of things that get talked about a lot in this industry, from resource combination to caching content, things you'd find on page speed, why slow. I want to highlight one down here. A lot of talk about third parties this, third parties that. What I really like about this initiative was the initiative that this study took to go back to the ad industry to take performance seriously, and we're really encouraging that within our customer base and with the prospects we talk about. There's some things you can't control directly, but as influencers, when you are a large customer or a group of medium-sized customers go back to the vendor and they hear that they might lose your business, you might find somebody else, they act. What happened? They did A/B testing. Obviously, this is new and it has a limited. We know very little about it. Just what was released in the press release. Performance went up on average by 19%. And we're going to come back and talk in the section where we actually reveal some of the data we've been talking about. These numbers around performance are we like to simplify, so 19%. And then what does that mean? In this case, it meant 0.9% increase in revenue per 1,000 pages. For a network of like About that has 700 sites, that's constantly driving squeezing every inch out, this is very important. Very, very important. Again, all of these organizations are sharing their data. I'll get back to that. All of them are seeing positive correlation. We've heard it before, and I know we all like to believe it, and we want to believe it. But we're seeing study after study which correlates this difference. Now, one thing that was mentioned today in the keynotes that also is very, very important that came out since Velocity was the fact that our rankings are now influenced by performance. There's very little data about this. Google has made available great tools to understand how to make your site faster, but the alchemy of the algorithm remains a closely guarded state secret. What we do know, or what's been made public, is that it's one of a number of different variables. I've heard anywhere from 180 to 250, but I'm certainly no expert. And we are dying for results. So if you're seeing results since this announcement was made, we'd love you to share them with us. We have one example of the companies we're going to talk about that are quote-unquote mortal companies, companies that can't raise armies of developers, or where that's a very expensive endeavor, where we did see some results about search, but it wasn't directly related to using site speed as a factor. Notice a trend. The trend in this is that all of the data, all of the public data, comes from the giants of the industry. And I get the opportunity, the wonderful opportunity, and I'm very grateful for it, to have a chance to speak either in person or on the phone with dozens of customers or prospective customers a day where we're pitching our story of we're going to make you faster automatically. And I remount these stats just every time, anytime you're on a conversation with me, I'll say, do you know what eBay did? Have you heard about the Amazon stats? And I had a CTO stop me, and he said, I don't really care what they do. It's not me. It doesn't impact me. I'm different. I don't have the visitors. I don't have the same number of visitors. I don't know if my visitors act the same way. I just don't know. So what we're here really to speak about is what are the stats when we look at mortal companies, when we look at companies that aren't in the top 20. What do they look like? We put out an initial set of slides about 6 months ago where we showed graphs, and we did them anonymously because it's pretty difficult and continues to be difficult to get our customers to share. One of the things I promised Steve and Jesse when I submitted this talk and was graciously accepted was we're going to tell you who they are, we're going to tell you what we did as much as we can, and we're going to show you the impact. One of the things that we see people agree on, and you've noticed this is in honor of Alistair, they've switched. This gentleman's now looking at her, is KPIs unite our teams. Parag here, who is the CTO of AutoAnything, is going to come up and talk, but he was instrumental in us seeing this change. We were in his office in San Diego about a year and a half ago, and AutoAnything and Parag's going to come tell us about what they do, and I'll butcher it, I'm sure, but the way I like to think about it is they're everything for your car. Replacement parts, accessories. We were in talking to Parag, and we were talking about, 2x. Parag, look, we're 2x. Payload's this, round-trip production's that. And he said, I sit at a management and executive level every week. And anytime I'm looking for budget, I have to make a business case. I'm not allowed, our CEO has said, I'm not allowed to come talk about performance stats. I'm not allowed to come talk about antivirus threat stats. That's just not interesting. When you tell me that you're going to speed up my site, you're like a windshield wiper. It's nice to have, a good windshield wiper, it's nice to have, but the stock one I got from my car is probably good enough. For me to make a case at the executive level, I need you to be my transmission. I need you to be an engine. I have to talk business. And since that talk, and he's here, and we're very proud that he's here, we're very proud he's a customer, since that talk, our business has changed. And we really focus on the KPI side. And there's a meeting of the minds there. I have yet to find a technical person, although I know that there's the reputation and all we care about is numbers. I have yet to find one person in this entire industry who, when I say you can go talk to your CEO or executive director about making more money, I have yet to see someone say, that's not interesting, or that's not compelling, or I'm not going to pitch it that way. I haven't seen it yet. There is a myth that all we care about is speeds and feeds and making things faster, and that's just not true. It's just not true. There's a meeting of the minds here around KPIs. I want to talk about the process that we're going to go through in the experimentation. But first, I want to talk about just general flow. This is, people come to your site. Once they've come to your site, they're going to bounce, or you're going to keep them, and they're going to become new visitors. You're going to grow, or good repeat visitors. They're going to look at lots of pages. They're going to spend lots of time on your site. And then it's going to translate into a KPI. And one of the key areas that's really important is we go through these KPIs. As you saw from the KPIs that have been presented before, you don't fit necessarily into every single one of these categories. Some of our customers really care about search. It's all about search. We have one customer today who makes that is their metric. Natural search is what they care about. We have some customers where it's all about ad clicks. That's their metric. That's where they make money. Other people come to us, and it's about user satisfaction or user productivity. Maybe it's an internal app. And obviously, we're going to spend a lot of time today talking about the customer that cares about conversion and cart size, because you put those two together, and you bump up revenue. Let's talk about the experiment. Here's what we did. Visitors came in from visitors came in from the wild. They hit Strangeloop. Now let me just digress very quickly and tell you, Strangeloop has a virtual appliance a physical appliance, and we recently announced a service. What's important about what we do is we sit in the traffic flow. Request comes in, we see it. Response goes out, we change it. That's our business. Attempting to improve performance, most importantly, improve KPIs. So we see requests coming in. We're not on the server. We see the server generate the HTML and the content that it normally would. That normal content comes out. We insert a segmentation marker. We insert a cookie. You're accelerated, you're unaccelerated. We then make a decision based on that segmentation marker. We accelerate that page. We make it faster. We rewrite that HTML to be just as optimized as we possibly can. Or we send it unaccelerated. And no matter which option is chosen, again, randomly, once you're in a group, you're going to stay there. I believe for most of these experiments, it's 3 months. The page is received. The script is processed. And analytics, not our analytics, although we have a component here, but the customer's analytics, Google Analytics, or Omniture, or Web Trends, or whatever tool you have, is going to be shipped this information so you can segment every key KPI that you manage based on which group you're in. In all the studies today, we did 50-50 splits, which again, when you look at most of the studies that are done by the large organizations are, you're taking 0.01% of traffic. We have some brave souls. When we talk about analytics, this is the kind of graph you'd see in Google Analytics. Now, obviously, as a revenue graph, our customers are generous, but they're not going to share this. What you'd see if you pulled up your revenue graph is you'd see a line, which would be Strangeloop accelerated, and you'd see a line which would be not accelerated. And what I hope to do for any business is to just send this picture without the blurs to a CEO and start collecting my money. And if you do your own acceleration in-house, you should be able to provide and present something like this and start collecting more money for your budget. Because this shows me, if you think at any of these intervals in any of these days, that one line's above the other, and when you look at a graph like this, that's all good, as long as it's the right line. And frankly, if it's the wrong line, you've probably learned something as well. Now, not only do we send data through to the customer's analytics, but we also collect some ourselves. We radio back to our data warehouse for customers that opt into this service, and I'm going to talk a lot more about that later. Performance data, because it's very difficult to send the performance data, the raw performance data, to a lot of the tools that are out there today. We hope we can get out of this business, because that's actually it's not interesting to us. But today, to send performance data and really analyze it in something like Google Analytics or Web Trends is really, really challenging. Let's talk about acceleration. When I talked to Steve about this, the question was, I need to know what you did. So I said, great, I'll show you what we did. Some of you might have seen this graph before. This was presented in a session about how to win the war in Afghanistan, and was picked up by the New York Times as why PowerPoint is a failure and why the military doesn't know what they're doing. I want to focus on the fact that I actually started to put together a presentation that showed all the interactions around acceleration and decided I did not want my slide to be showed up as how PowerPoint is dysfunctional. The reality is, let's take a look at one of the data sets. And I want to explain to you why this is complicated. One of the data sets has over 500 million page views. One of the data sets has 130,000 individual pages. 52,000 of those are landing pages, where somebody started their flow through the site. We're talking about 10 major browsers, 110 versions, and 9 page views per customer. So when I come and tell you, we sped up this site by 2x, what does that mean? On what? For who? Across the flow? On the home page? What does acceleration mean? This is a really challenging question. To be frank, as vendors in this space, we try to dumb it down to one number because we think it's easier for you to digest. We are trying to mature and explain to you that this process actually is really complicated. You want to treat a landing page differently than you want to treat a page that you think people don't land on. You want to treat things differently. And you want to, the browsers are different. This is a very complicated process. I want to just talk to you about what acceleration means. What acceleration means to us is we have a number of inputs. One of the inputs, obviously, is the URL. We need to know what page it is. www.example.com. We need to know what browser you're on. Because if you're going to do acceleration, and you're going to do it effectively, browsers are all different. What you're going to do for an iPhone, if you're going to really optimize, is going to be different than what you're going to do for IE6, et cetera. We then need to know what the user flow is. Have you been to the site before? Is this a landing page for you? Is it not a landing page? Were you back? Who are you? Not only that, but we need to know what other people have done in order to really do optimal acceleration. You are just as likely to follow that 9-page flow as someone else. If there are consistencies there, we can take advantage of those trends, and we can accelerate even more. So what does acceleration mean in the context of what we're talking about today? Well, we optimize caching. We're going to make sure, ideally, that you never come back for the same thing twice. We're going to make sure that when a resource does change, you don't have stale content. So when we talk about this bucket of acceleration and we talk about the business benefits across these sites in various degrees, depending on where you are in this incredibly complicated flow, we're going to optimize caching. We're going to also minimize round trips as much as we can. And again, how you would minimize round trips on a landing page is different than how you'd minimize round trips on a page that's not a landing page, for example. We're going to minimize the payload size as much as we can across the pages that we're going to talk about and the sites we're going to accelerate. We want to optimize browser rendering. This involves moving scripts around, putting things at the right place in the right browser, et cetera. We're going to optimize images. The image I get on my iPhone doesn't necessarily need to be the image I get on my desktop. We're going to automatically rewrite to CDNs. Most customers have CDNs. They want to take advantage of that. We need the ability to be able to say, hey, we want to turn it on. In a couple of the examples, and we'll talk through it, they all own CDNs. In one of the examples, they own the Akamai DSA product, which is actually full site acceleration through a CDN. We're going to flush the buffer early as often as we can automatically on a lot of these sites. Talked about, is Eric here? I probably bored him on my last chat, so he decided this wasn't interesting. I overheard one of his conversations. He said, that was just not detailed. That was in our last chat. One of the challenges, before I talk about that, in this environment is the levels. We have people, we did a session yesterday, Hooman and I, about acceleration. And we had people who came up to us and said, that was way too fast. And we had people who came up and said, yeah, it wasn't interesting until the 78th minute. Kind of like the football game. Score? Germany won on the subject of last minute. We also were going to do a lot of preloading and take advantage of the fact that not only is the link between the browser and the server waiting while the server's thinking of churning out data, we can take advantage of that, but we can also take advantage of when a user's waiting. So when I talk about acceleration, we're talking about some or all of these things happening on the pages that the customers are going through to look at the KPIs. And what does it look like? It looks like an output which is different for each specific browser group. So that's what I mean when I talk about acceleration. I'm not going to look at one waterfall and dissect it here. We've done that before. We have an example of what a waterfall might look like before and after on a first and repeat view page. Obviously, I've picked a beauty. They don't all look this beautiful. We did a talk yesterday where we went through and actually talked about each of the individual steps up to a point. We optimized the velocity homepage. You can see that and the slides to it there. If you're interested in finding out more about what acceleration looks like, there are great resources out there. Let's talk about the site data. Let's get into it. My timer over here is broken, so I'm going to just do a quick check of time to make sure that we are still on board here. And I'm going to invite Parag to come up and give you an introduction. One of the things we hear when we talk to customers is, I'm not going to share my data with you. Some people are local heroes, and I want to talk through them. I'm just going to go through quickly here. Sorry, Parag. And talk about this data. So I want Parag to introduce AutoAnything to us, and then I'm going to take it from there. Hello. Okay.
Thanks, Joshua. So AutoAnything is a small retailer, as Josh said, not an Amazon, obviously, of automotive accessories primarily. So we are a family-owned business. And I've been in business for about 30 years and made the transition to the web about 11 years ago. So our team, because of the size of our company and the complexity of the product that we sell, we have a small team in the technology department, and we focus really on providing a good user experience for customers on how they buy the product, not necessarily focus on how fast they can navigate the site, because we can only put our resources into so many areas given the limits. And given it's a family-owned business, we're very ROI focused. So almost everything we do, has to have a positive, overwhelmingly positive return. So, we partnered with Josh, like he said, a year and a half, 2 years ago, to help us on that piece of our infrastructure that is actually very difficult to influence ourselves given all the complexities.
Thank you, sir. Parag was generous enough so that I wouldn't butcher that. I wanted to start here, just cognizant of time. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I want to flow through this, and then I want to come back through some of the other examples, but I wanted to make sure that Parag got a chance to introduce AutoAnything. I want to show you what the homepage looks like from my house. Optimized versus unoptimized. More importantly, I want to tell you about the business impact. We saw average order size in the study that we did go up by 6%. Again, remember, revenue is average order size times conversion rate. 9% jump in conversion after we accelerated the site. We saw that 29% of people were more likely to buy on their first visit, which is a fascinating stat. We also found that 38% were more likely to return for a second visit. Obviously, our data fidelity degrades over time in this particular stat because people can clear cookies. We might lose some data fidelity, so we tried to stick just to second visit. But the stats were overwhelming. And for a business that, Parag says mom and pop, but let's be honest, this is quite a large organization. They put through many zeros of revenue. I can't actually share that revenue figure with you. But overwhelmingly positive data and influential data. Again, one of the mortal companies that we're bringing as part of our study. Thanks, sir. Let's move on. I'm just going to go back a few slides because, again, cognizant of time, I wanted to make sure we got that in. Just going to go back really quickly through two other examples. One of the examples I want to talk to you today about is J.C. Whitney. Again, we put up Alexa ranks here because obviously sharing key stats like pages and other things our customers weren't necessarily comfortable with us sharing, but we certainly did share some of the public data. Probably a rank that might feel like you. 600 to 800 person company. What's fascinating about this business is that the CEO is on the conversion team. I love it. These guys get it. They not only get it, but they spend a lot of money on conversion and optimization already. They own the Akamai DSA product. They're running a lot of stuff quickly. Let's take a look at what performance difference we saw on the homepage from my house. Again, in line with some of the things we saw before, let's look at the business impact. Revenue's been up 2%. Conversion up 2%. Customers are 7% more likely to buy on the first visit. Obviously, different statistics than what Parag has said. And what's so important, and what I really want to emphasize is what is your curve? It's not the same for everybody. Different revenue here, different statistics here, different performance. Different investment already in acceleration. I want to take you through one more example, then I want to talk to you about some aggregate stats because we're just almost out of time. Everyday Health, larger organization than the ones we saw before. These guys are these are all of their web properties. They are the go-to medical health diet. My wife actually was funny because she didn't know that this was one of our customers, and we just had a baby, my 7-week-old, and she kept sending me updates from whattoexpect.com about what my baby looked like. It kind of looked like a little amorphic thing, and then it grew. And she was fascinated by it. I thought it was quite interesting, I guess. Everyday health. What's the difference here? This is the what to expect site. Now, we've talked about conversion, revenue. I want to talk about a different stat. This one's really interesting to me, which is for this organization, search is just critical. What they found when they started to put acceleration techniques into place was, and what they looked at and what they focused on was their crawl stats. They found that their time spent downloading a page for the crawler was almost halved, and more importantly, instead of 40,000 pages per day were crawled, we were getting up to 80. You can pretty much see where we went in, right here. And when they started to make the investment in acceleration. So again, coming back to my first point, it's not just about who, conversion or ad clicks. It's about what's important to you. Look at that when you make optimization. Just skip through this and talk about one last stat, because I've got a minute and a half here. Aggregated data. So we are, as I said, radioing back performance data. When we combine that with our other data, we're able to start looking at some fascinating trends. The trend cycle that we're going to look at here is all related to landing page. What happens? What is the relationship between the performance of your landing page and key metrics? This is 5 companies, all in a very similar space with very similar conversion rates, that have aggregated their data all together. We're trying to find some curves. What happens to your bounce rate as performance changes? Well, this is fascinating. The benchmark is about 1 second. That's baseline. When your site goes from 1 second to 3 seconds in this aggregated group, your bounce rate goes up by 50%. This curve, although we have a lot of data, we expect it to continue to smooth out. The first data points were all over the place. As we started to add more and more data in, it got smoother and smoother. Let's take a look at pages per visit. Correlates pretty well with the stats that we saw from AOL. 5 customers, all aggregating data into one source. Let's look at the big one, conversion rate. Anyone who's going to tell me there's a 3-second rule or an 8-second rule or even a 2-second rule, when I look at data like this, I just don't believe them. One of the things we're doing is, this is stats that we collect for ourselves. We've done a blog post where I really encourage you to go, and we want to open this up to the world. I don't know if it's a good idea, but we would like to open this up so we create this data warehouse where other people can be subscribing to it, sending us data. It involves a change in JavaScript on your site. I want to hear if this is a good idea. We want more data in that repository. So if you do want to comment or have input, I'd love to hear it. That concludes our session. We have a booth. Parag will be at the booth at 3:30 today and a few times tomorrow if you want to ask him questions. We will also be at the booth to answer any and all of your questions about the data. I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.